Yo, what's up everybody, Rich Cage 20 here, back with another Mr. Ballen story. Still have no idea if any of these are actually ever going to come out, but I'm having so much fun going through these stories, and I'm going to keep recording them just in case this is some kind of thing that I keep doing in the future. Today we have This Man Ruined 6 Lives in 6 Seconds. It's a kind of a shorter one than the other two we were having earlier, yesterday. Not sure how This Man Ruined 6 Lives in 6 Seconds. There's many ways to do that. I wonder which one this is about. My just right out the gate guess would imagine some kind of either mass shooting or I don't know. I think from this thumbnail scrolling, I saw someone with a car, so maybe just decided to drive on the sidewalk or something like that. No idea what this one's about, who this is about, but we're just kind of going along from recent down on these stories, and this was the next one, so let's find out what kind of destruction we are talking about here today. I'm ready to get in on it. Can't promise that I won't pause a fuck ton. It's just my nature, it's what I do. So we'll see what happens. Ooh, fix my hair down. Okay.
In the early morning hours of April 27, 2006, a phone rang inside of a home in rural Michigan. When the homeowner answered it, what they would hear would instantly ruin their lives. But that phone call was nothing compared to the call they got 5 weeks later. This story has one of the most insane plot twists we've ever covered on this channel.
I like that.
So make sure you stick around to the end to hear what it is. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place, because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So if that's of interest to you, please invite the like button to come on over your house for a sleepover, but then give them a bed without pillows or blankets. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story.
I'm ready, dog. Let's go. Let's get it then. I love twists. I love an M. Night Shyamalan any day. Well, I've only watched like maybe 2 or 3 M. Night Shyamalan movies, so maybe that's not true.
On Wednesday, April 26th, 2006, a bright, beautiful, outgoing 18-year-old named Whitney Sarek began making her way across her campus towards her lecture hall where she had a class that morning. Whitney was a freshman at Taylor University, which is an evangelical Christian liberal arts college located in Upland, Indiana. Upland is a little town that sits about 2 miles east of Interstate 69 and is situated right between the two much larger cities of Indianapolis and Fort Wayne. As Whitney made her way along the pathway across campus and she passed by other throngs of students hustling to their own classes, she suddenly had a pang of anxiety as she realized the end of the school year was fast approaching. And while Whitney was definitely excited to head back home to rural Gaylord, Michigan, where she was from, to spend her summer vacation, she was also kind of bummed because she would have to say bye to all of her new friends in college that she wouldn't see again until after summer break in the fall when the next school year started. Whitney had made a ton of friends over the course of her freshman year, and by and large they were other freshmen like herself. But she did have a few friends that were upperclassmen, because early in Whitney's collegiate career,
I was gonna say, like, there's distinct differences, but that looks a lot like my sister when she was in college. It's kind of eerie. Like, there's some facial differences, but a lot of the hair color, hair length, kind of bone structure, face structure is very similar. Just the kind of, there's differences, key differences in the eyes and the mouth and nose and whatnot, but it looks a lot like my sister's. So that's kind of weird.
She had discovered that upperclassmen were just as friendly as freshmen, and they came with the bonus of lots of experience and expertise. And if you just asked them for guidance or advice, they'd be happy to give it to you. And so over the course of the school year, anytime Whitney had an opportunity to interact with or be around upperclassmen, she would take it, thinking, maybe I can learn something. And in fact, that morning, as Whitney was making her way across campus, she saw a sign that was asking for students to volunteer to the next day head out to this banquet hall to set up this big banquet for the school's new incoming president. And so when Whitney walked over to the table and asked the people what this was all about, she would learn that the majority of the people that had signed up to be volunteers so far were upperclassmen. And so as soon as she heard that, Whitney was quick to write her name down as well. The rest of the day would...
It sounds like a free meal, like right off the gate. That don't, as a college student, that's already a deal winner right there. However, I'm starting to get the feeling that maybe no one gave this person permission to be in campus getting these signatures, and there's no actual dinner banquet for a new. I don't think. First off, I don't think you'd be bringing students, really, just any student who wants to sign up to a dinner banquet in honor of the new dean, president, whatever, of the university. I feel like there's something that a lot of maybe staff and faculty would be invited to, and maybe a small selection of students may be picked by faculty and professors and whatnot. But that does not sound like something that someone would be on the side of the road getting signatures and just volunteering like, hey, you want to come to a banquet, free meal? That's already warning signs are popping off in my head. That's suspicious. All right. But hey, who can turn down the appeal of a free meal? Am I right?
Go completely as normal for Whitney. She would go to her classes, she would study, she would meet up with friends, and then eventually in the evening, she would make her way back to her dorm room where she would go to sleep. Little did she know, when she put her head down on the pillow that night, she was within 24 hours of her life changing in the most drastic way imaginable. The following morning, Whitney got up early, she took a shower, she brushed her teeth, and then she spent quite a while just staring at her wardrobe, debating which outfit she was going to wear, and then finally she chose the one she wanted and she got dressed. Whitney was not vain, but she knew the whole day would be spent around upperclassmen and university staff, and so she wanted to look her best. On her way towards her door to leave, Whitney would stop and look in her mirror one last time to make sure she looked okay. And in this fleeting moment, as she's looking herself up and down, she couldn't help but feel a justifiable sense of pride in this woman looking back at her. She had gotten into a great college, she had moved hundreds of miles from home and lived alone by herself for the first time, and her grades all year had been excellent. And so as Whitney's looking at herself, she thought to herself, you know what? I'm doing pretty good. Whitney...
hell, that's a lot of self-confidence and stuff that it's hard to get in a lot of people around high school to college, you know what I mean? So, like, to have that look in on yourself that, man, I'm looking good. Like, I feel good about the way I look. My grades are popping. I'm in college. I'm doing shit. Like, it's rare to have that kind of sight at oneself. But, like, that's really good stuff right there. I'm sure it doesn't end well for her. As in, I think it's setting up that she's, she done. And I wonder if this is going to turn into one of those, like, I don't know if this is just going to be a quick and clean, or if this is going to be one of those you invite a bunch of people to your house. Turns out to be some, like, Saw kind of, like, a horror movie, like, okay, only one of you gets to leave here alive. There's a bunch of weapons scattered throughout the house, hunt each other, kind of things. I don't know if it's going to turn into one that, like, dark web, creepy shit, but that would be very exciting if that's where this story goes. But it could just be as simple as, like, they poison the meal, or just someone comes in with a gun and mows them all down. Who the fuck knows? But it's the story's building towards something crazy right now. He's building her up just so that when she gets teared down, it's a bigger deal.
His gaze would move from her reflection up to the clock on the wall, and she would see she was running late. And so she quickly grabbed her jacket, she threw it over her shoulder, and she went out the door. When Whitney arrived at the meeting spot in the parking lot nearby, she saw there was a group of what looked like students standing around a university van. And so Whitney walked up to them, and sure enough, this was the group of volunteers. It consisted of 7 other Taylor students, most of which were seniors, and 1 university staff member. And so Whitney didn't...
Hold up. 7 others? Does that mean 8 including her or 7 including her? Because one, last person alive gets to leave. 6 die, 6 lives ruined. Just saying. Like, maybe this theory's coming together.
Know any of them, and so she quickly introduced herself. Everyone said hi, and then because Whitney was the last person they were waiting on, very quickly after she arrived, they were kind of ushered into the van, and then the van pulled out of the parking lot and began heading north towards Fort Wayne. Fort Wayne was where the banquet hall was. It was located about an hour north. At some point...
I mean, I went to a very different university than I'm assuming a lot of universities are like. This is a banquet hall for your university that's an hour away from the campus? Or is that just what was claimed? Because that sounds bizarre as fuck, but I don't know. I don't know how other colleges work.
During this drive north, Whitney struck up a conversation with a 22-year-old senior named Laura Van Ryn, who was sitting right next to her. Whitney and Laura were total strangers, but they looked so similar physically. They were both tall, blonde, and very slim, that when they first got onto the van, one of the other volunteers actually asked them if they were related. But it wasn't just physical similarities that Laura and Whitney shared. Once they got to talking, Whitney would learn that Laura had also grown up in a small rural Michigan town. It was called Caledonia, and it was located only a couple of hours south of Gaylord, where Whitney had grown up. After the van finally arrived in Fort Wayne, the volunteers got out, they went inside of the banquet hall building, and for the next several hours, they set up tables and chairs, they put out silverware, they hung up decorations, and the whole time, Laura and Whitney just stayed close together, continuing their friendly banter.
So I guess that makes sense. It's kind of like you get the stories is getting a little bit better for why they would be chosen. It's just like, oh, well, you volunteer, you help set it up, and if you help set it up, you get to be part of the banquet. This is making more sense now as to why people would buy this, that someone would be, that some random person, student, etc., or random, what you assume is faculty member, would be signing people up to come to this banquet. Because that's logical. It's plausible. I would buy that. Why people would think like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. So that's logical.
And then around 7 p.m., when the banquet hall was ready for the next day's ceremony, the volunteers decided their work was done, and so they left the banquet hall building, they piled back into the van, and began heading south back towards their campus. For the first few minutes of the ride, Laura and Whitney would just continue to chat with each other, but pretty quickly they, like the rest of the people in the volunteer group, just were tired from all the hard work of moving things around, and so they became quiet and began looking out the window, just kind of keeping to themselves. About 30 minutes later, when the van was within a couple of miles of their campus, Whitney would turn and look next to her at Laura just for a second. And right as she did, Laura would actually look up and look at Whitney. And so for a really quick second, they made eye contact. And so Whitney kind of awkwardly smiled at her. And as Laura was smiling back at Whitney, Whitney realized something very strange. There was this bright light on the side of Laura's face. And then seconds later, that bright light had grown and the entire interior of the van was completely whited out. And then a second later, someone towards the front of the van yelled, "Oh my God, no!" And then the van went completely silent. Today's video is sponsored by NordVPN. You ever find yourself in Chocolaco, Alabama, looking for some light, up online to start searching for the perfect crow jacket, and then you get hit from motorists.
Okay. Advertisements, man, they're great. Anyways.
Okay, back to the story. Within minutes, dozens of 911 calls were coming in from motorists on I-69 saying that something terrible had happened. When first responders arrived on scene, they were braced for the worst, but even still, they were shocked at what they saw. Scattered all over the northbound and southbound lanes of I-69, not far from Taylor University, were all these huge chunks of jagged metal. There was glass everywhere, and there were bodies everywhere. That light that Whitney saw growing on Laura's face that suddenly filled the entirety of the van were the headlights of an 80,000-pound, fully loaded tractor-trailer truck driven by Robert Spencer. Robert
got hit by a semi. So the whole... Okay. Well, I mean, I was going off of some kind of like movie shit here, but... I mean, there is a twist. I mean, the people on the truck could be in on it. You never know. Or the bus or whatever. Because he did say there was a twist in here. But, like, I was going, like, horror movie, like a dinner party, Hunger Games situation. I don't know. I think that story would have been crazier. but I'm still engaged in what this possible twist could be instead of just an accidental... T-bone accident that ended up destroying a bunch of people. What's this twist? What something with this man was intended. This was supposed to happen. I'm feeling it. I'm pretty much like 10 for 10 on these guesses with, you know, the first one I did being drug dealers. Everyone knows that they were smuggling some of that white powder, you know what I mean? Like, everyone knows, 100% got that one. I'm calling these twists like all the time, so like chances are I'm right about this one too.
Was a truck driver, and he was traveling north on I-69 when he fell asleep at the wheel, at which point his truck veered off the road into the grassy median between the northbound side and the southbound side of I-69.
Oh, no.
His truck bounced up onto the southbound lane and crashed into Laura and Whitney's van, and when it did, the impact literally peeled off the side of their van.
Ooh, it literally sheared half of it apart. Holy fuck. And that's on a freeway. These are two bigger than average vehicles, one much bigger than average, slamming into each other, going at a very fast velocity. That there's no survival in that situation. Everyone's fucking dead. Like, maybe the people driving might be okay. Like, the one in the passenger seat here might have been okay, but like, that's almost immediate termination of everyone in that vehicle. That's fuck, dude.
And sent the van spinning. And so as the van is spinning, because of this huge opening in the side of it, the students inside were literally being violently thrown out of the van into traffic. When first responders finally actually began surveying the crash site, they would find Robert still in his truck. He was alive.
Of course,
but they would discover that of the 9 occupants inside of that van, 5 were deceased. A few hours later, in the early morning hours of April 27th, Whitney Sarik's family, back home in Gaylord, Michigan, woke up to the sound of a phone ringing. When one of Whitney's parents answered the phone, it was the Grant County coroner telling them their daughter had been in a terrible accident and she was deceased. At the same time, 3 hours south of Gaylord, Michigan, in Caledonia, Michigan, the Van Ryn family also was woken up in the middle of the night to a phone call, except the call they got was that their daughter Laura had been in that same crash, but she had survived, although she was in critical condition. In the days that followed, the Sarik family had Whitney's body transported to Gaylord, and then they began to plan for her funeral.
Something's going on here. Like, obviously I know that something's going down because he mentioned at the forefront that there was a twist on this bad boy. I'm trying to guess that Shyamalan twist. But because he made it such a point to identify the fact that they were so similar, and he's really highlighting an emphasis, this could be to throw off the trail, you never know. He does do that, which is very smart, very clever. But he highlighted the fact that they were very similar and they lived very close to each other. But he's also was highlighting, like, however she survived, and something's gonna happen here. Something's gonna happen here. He's emphasizing certain points in here, and God, there's still 10 minutes left. I don't know what the fuck's gonna happen up in this bitch. All right, let's keep it going.
Funeral that would have to be closed casket because of the extensive damage to Whitney's body.
100%.
Meanwhile, Laura Van Rin's family rushed to Parkview Hospital in Fort Wayne, and they would find their daughter bandaged head to toe with a neck brace on, laying in a hospital bed in a coma. Doctors would tell Laura's family that even though Laura was now stable, there was no way of knowing if she would ever come out of that coma. And even if she did, she had suffered a serious brain injury, which likely would impact her ability to function. And so, knowing that at best this was going to be a very long road to recovery, Laura's family decided to move her from Fort Wayne back home to Michigan to a rehabilitation center in Grand Rapids that specialized in brain injury. And so while the Van Rins were in the process of moving Laura back to Michigan, the Sareks were in the process of saying their final goodbyes to Whitney. On April 29th, so 3 days after the accident, the Sareks would hold a visitation in their hometown of Gaylord. A visitation is a time for friends and acquaintances to come together and pay respects and offer condolences to the people that the deceased have left behind. For Whitney's visitation, more than 1,400 people attended, which was nearly half of Gaylord's total population.
Yeah.
The following day, on April 30th, Whitney was buried. At the same time, Laura's family, who had been taking turns keeping a 24-hour bedside vigil with Laura in the Grand Rapids facility, were given some incredible news. Based on brain scans, it looked very much like Laura would wake up from her coma, although there was no timeline. Over the next couple of weeks, Laura remained comatose, but her body would slowly begin to heal, and all signs seemed to be pointing towards her eventually making a recovery. And then on Tuesday, May 16th, so 20 days after the accident, Laura woke up from her coma. And amazingly...
I mean, that's lucky, dude. Like, some people don't wake up for years. 20 days, that's pretty impressive. Something's going on here, but that is quite impressive.
At first, it seemed like her brain was functioning the way it should be. The family could...
Is this kind of like some kind of like... Follow me here. Follow me. I'm never wrong in these. So far, I have an incredible record. Follow me here. Is this some kind of like... Not necessarily Final Destination, because Final Destination doesn't quite work this way, but some kind of like fantasy-based, like she took the hit and like her essence like got absorbed by the other one, and she's like helping her like recover in some weird spiritual way. Let's find out. I mean, I guess we'll keep going to find out, but that's my guess. It's my theory. My new theory I'm cooking up here. Foolproof, cannot be possibly wrong.
Not believe their luck. This was a miracle.
Yeah,
over the next few days, Laura would slowly regain her strength to the point where she could move some limbs and she could sit up in her bed. And then as for her cognitive function, it seemed like she was making strides, but then she would do something that would make doctors and her family and everybody around her start to question if her brain really was okay. On Monday, May...
Is it Whitney's brain? Personality swapped into the other one? Weird theory.
22nd, so 1 week after Laura had woken up from her coma, she was sitting in her hospital bed with her physical therapist right next to her, and her family was in the room as well. And at some point, her physical therapist handed Laura a pencil, and then she put a pad of paper in front of her. And then the therapist told Laura to write a word down that was very specific. It was a word that Laura should know well, and a word that Laura should be able to spell. So after Laura kind of gave a nod, saying she understood the assignment, Laura took the pencil and very awkwardly and painstakingly wrote out a word. But when she was done, and the therapist looked at what she had written, it was wrong. It didn't make any sense. And so she asked Laura to do it again. And so Laura, with even more determination, would try to write this word. And once again, she wrote the same word, the same incorrect word. And so it was at this point that the therapist and the onlooking family started to realize that, her injury to her brain might be more extensive than we thought. However, as everyone in that room would soon find out, that was not the case. There was something much, much bigger going on. Back on April 26th, just minutes after the car accident, first responders began moving about the crash site to figure out who was deceased and who was still alive. When they found Laura, she was barely clinging to life on the side of the road, and so they rushed over to her. They put her on a stretcher along with her purse, which contained her driver's license. They put that all together, they put her on an ambulance, and they sent her to the hospital. Once Laura arrived at the hospital, doctors would use her driver's license inside of her purse to identify her, and then they began wrapping her head to toe in bandages and casts. And when bandages began coming off,
did they ask her to write her name, and she didn't put her name, but she instead put Whitney's name because it's actually not Laura, it's Whitney? Is that, if I'm getting the names right, is that what's happening here?
Over the following weeks, it was immediately obvious to everyone that this accident had significantly altered Laura's physical appearance, most notably her teeth. They almost looked like they had been shifted to one side in her mouth. However, to Laura's family, they didn't care how she looked. They only cared that she was still alive. But on Monday, May 22nd, when Laura was handed that piece of paper and a pencil, and she was told to write her name.
Told it. She's writing Whitney, isn't she? And it's not actually Laura, is it?
She did not write Laura, Laura. She wrote Whitney, Whitney.
Yeah.
It would turn out a colossal mistake was made, and nobody caught it until that moment. The woman sitting in the hospital bed with the pencil and paper was not 22-year-old Laura Van Ryn. The woman sitting in the hospital bed was 18-year-old Whitney Sarek. When Whitney was found on the side of the road clinging to life, the first responders thought the purse next to her was hers, and so they opened it up, they found a driver's license, they looked at it, and they looked at the victim on the ground, and they looked identical, and so they said, okay, this is Laura. And amazingly, Whitney's purse that contained her driver's license happened to land on the ground next to...
Okay. How fucked is that for the parents? Be like, your daughter's dead. Couple of weeks later, 4 weeks later, 3 to 4 weeks later, it's like, oh, JK, your daughter ain't dead. We thought that was your daughter. That wasn't actually your daughter. Your daughter's alive, by the way. I know you just spent 4 months mourning, but like, she good. She really good. She's gonna be fine. You have a daughter again. By the way, this is not your daughter. Our bad. Sorry. Oh man, whoever's job it is to deliver that information is really unfortunate. That's really fucking unfortunate.
Laura's body. And so Laura was misidentified as Whitney Sarek. A week after Whitney had written her name down on that pad of paper, it was officially confirmed that this was a case of mistaken identity. And so once again, the Sarek family received a call in the middle of the night from,
hey, Beach Dubs, our bad,
the Grant County coroner. Except this time, they were telling them that your daughter did not die in that car accident. She's alive. She's in Grand Rapids waiting for you. And so the Sarek family, they were completely shocked.
What do you do about that information?
True, but it just seemed too good to be true. They had had a funeral for Whitney. They had buried Whitney. Except because it was closed casket, they never saw Whitney.
They never actually saw the body. But I mean, even if they did see the body, it probably would have been way too deformed. They'd have been like, close enough, that's gotta be our daughter. Like, you would never, there'd be no way you'd be able to check to see that, man.
And so the Sareks hopped in a plane, they flew to Grand Rapids, and they walked into that hospital room, and there on the hospital bed was their daughter Whitney with her arms outstretched, crying, calling for her parents. Well, this, of course, was a miracle for the Sareks.
Yeah.
It was, at the same time, a complete nightmare for the Van Ryns. They had had their suspicions that something was off about their daughter, most notably her teeth, because they just didn't look like their daughter's teeth. But they had been told by the doctors and by anybody who would talk to them that it was perfectly normal for people involved in these very significant accidents to look completely different or even act completely different. And so the Van Ryns just kind of put their suspicions to the side and focused on looking after their child and helping her recover.
I mean, it's kind of nice both ways if you think about it. Because, man, all my twists were so wrong. I guessed it finally by the end, but at that point it was a little bit obvious what was going to happen. But, like, I thought that because of the title, he's really good at these misleading titles. Because the title, like, that was supposed to happen. Like, whoever scheduled that event, that was planned. They were trying to clean out some of the students or something for some kind of sick death games or something like that, or what have you. But like, okay, I was thinking way too big of a twist on this bitch. I was going way too big in the twist, but it is kind of sweet in a way, in both ways. Like, because you know the one parents that thought their daughter was dead, they had like an amazing gathering and had this great funeral for her. You know, they did her justice for the other family. That was kind of sad that that family didn't have to. Didn't get to see their daughter, you know, laid to rest, which is really unfortunate. And at the same time, this other family was there and super supportive and loving to help nurse their daughter that they thought was dead the other way back to health and whatnot, and be able to give them the news. So they both kind of did something really sweet without even knowing it for each other's child. Like, it's kind of really cool. There was no splice thing that happened though. That would have been like, I mean, that would have been pretty cool, but it's fine.
A few days later, Laura Van Rin's body, which had been buried in Gaylord, Michigan, under the tombstone that said Whitney Sarek, was exhumed, and her body was flown to Caledonia, where the Van Rin family was able to give their daughter a proper funeral and burial. Even though Whitney and Laura had only known each other very briefly during that volunteer event in Fort Wayne, their families would forge a bond over this shared trauma. And in 2008, 2 years after the crash, the Sareks and the Van Rins would co-author a book about their experience in going through this horrible event from each of their perspectives. That book is called Mistaken Identity: Two Families, One Survivor, Unwavering Hope.
I mean, that is extremely unfortunate. But at the same time, that's very cool that they came together like that to, like, it doesn't happen very often, if ever. Like, maybe occasionally has occurred throughout history, but this doesn't happen like very often. So the fact that they came together through their sorrow after, you know, some time to heal and whatnot, and wrote this book is pretty fucking cool. You know?
Also that year, on April 26th, so the second anniversary of the accident, Taylor University would dedicate a prayer chapel to the 5 victims. Since the crash, Indiana has changed their state's protocols and procedures for identifying accident victims to ensure this type of mix-up can never happen again. As for Robert Spencer, the truck driver who caused the fatal accident, he would be sentenced to 4 years in prison.
Like, I know it wasn't intentional. Like, I know, like, you know, accidents happen, you know, truck drivers gotta drive long distances and whatnot, and, you know, falling asleep is just really unfortunate, yet not intentional. So it's not intentional manslaughter, but it's still manslaughter. That is 6. 5 to 6. Yeah. About 5 lives there that were just ended because dude didn't know his own limits, fell asleep at the wheel behind a gigantic death machine, and got 4 years for it. For multiple cases of manslaughter, got 4 years for it, just because it was accidental. That doesn't really seem right. I mean, I'm not saying like you should have 5 life sentences or anything like that, but, like, you know, maybe at least like 10 to 15 years or something. But like 4, I don't know about that, man. Like, ruined multiple lives, not only of these students with a bright future in front of them, potentially bright future in front of them. You never know what people are going to go do after college. But also all the families attached to that, multiple, like, fathers, mothers, siblings. Like, that is tons of futures just absolutely shattered because dude fell asleep. Like, you have a truck in your bed for a reason, or a bed in your truck. There you go. You have a bed in your truck for a fucking reason, dude. I know you got deadlines to meet and stuff, but like, maybe being a little late on a deadline would have been the right choice. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. 4 years seems a little fucking late for me, but it's whatever.
So that's going to do it. If you got something out of today's episode and you haven't done this already,
yes, the like button. Yeah, I know. I feel you there with the like button. Okay, so that was a very interesting story there. Never heard that one before. I'm sure there's gonna be one of these that's gonna start like the title's gonna be misleading and whatnot, and I'm gonna start listening to it and be like, wait, isn't that this guy? Or isn't that this story? Hold on a tick, and then it's gonna be a story I actually know. But most of these I don't know. I don't usually look up any kind of like crazy death stories like this or true crimes or stuff like that. I really don't pay attention to those. The only time I ever actually do pay attention to those is when Skin releases a new video, and then I go pay attention to it. But I don't really like to go study pain, suffering, murder, death, insanity. Like, I usually don't just like check that out on my like day-to-day life. That's not really something that brings me happiness and joy, so like I don't do it, you know what I mean? I kind of prefer to just, you know, laugh and have a good time and watch stuff that's entertaining and fun than horrific and the insanity of human beings and how they murder each other like livestock for fun. You know, it doesn't really bring a smile on my face, you know, so I don't really pay attention to this kind of stories and stuff. So a lot of this I've never heard before. But yeah, that was interesting. I mean, I'll just say it wasn't like a super twist of like some kind of dinner party Hunger Games situation, or, you know, one person absorbed the essence of the other person that took the death blow for them kind of thing. You know, like, it wasn't like any crazy M. Night Shyamalan twist, but like, it was still a pretty good twist. I won't lie. That was a good story. So thank you all for joining me. Let me know if you had similar thoughts that I was having throughout that story or not. Like, did you see the dinner party coming? Because I saw the dinner party coming. But it's whatever. Anyways, I'll see y'all next time.